as we just saw, if you commit yourself to follow someone, they might take you where you did not plan to go. We just saw it, did we not? Followed right out. Who knows? She could have gone to the parking lot. Thank you for helping her come back. How do you choose your leaders? How do you know whom you want to follow? What do you look for? We have to ask these questions. We have to converse with one another, because in a few months you are going to be looking for a permanent leader under call. So as we come to this text this morning, we have good reason to pause. And first of all, take a look at who this Jesus is. To talk with each other about how you have experienced this Jesus. Because we as disciples of Christ say we're following. Wherever Jesus might lead us, even when it leads us to not just unknown places, but in that unknown place, it can be very scary. So we have to decide, are we sure that Jesus is the kind of person that we want to follow? The text that we just heard from the Gospel of John tells a different kind of a calling story than what we'll hear next week from Mark. It's interesting that in these few weeks of Epiphany, we've sort of heard a little bit from Mark, and we've heard a little bit from John. So we heard the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that's our birth story. And then we read the story from the beginning of Mark. Mark, like John, doesn't tell us a thing about the shepherds or the wise men or the angels. Nothing about the stable at Bethlehem. Mark just gets right into the nuts and bolts of the story and says, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. And then he starts telling us who this Jesus was. Their stories about calling disciples are very different. And we're very fortunate to have two different ways to look at how it is that Jesus calls the disciples, because Jesus calls each one of us differently. Our stories are not the same. Your story of how Jesus has called you to go with him on your journey of faith and life, your story is different from the person sitting next to you, even if the person sitting next to you is the love of your life and has been your lifelong partner. So we do well to hear multiple stories. In the John story, the words that come again and again and again are, come and see. Come and see who this Jesus is. So I thought for a few minutes this morning, I would share with you the aspects of Jesus as the one I want to follow. The aspects that strike me deepest, that make me yearn the most intensely, not just to follow, but to try to be like this Jesus. When we have a leader whom we fully respect and honor, we find ourselves gravitating toward similar ways. So the first thing I'd say is what I experience in all of these stories about Jesus, the one thing that strikes me deepest is Jesus' ways of invitation. Come along, come and see, come as you are. You don't have to clean up your life first. Just come. I want you to be with me. I'm thinking right now of the story of Zacchaeus. Remember how Zacchaeus wanted to see who this Jesus was, and he was too low because he couldn't see over the crowds. So he climbs up in this big tree, and he's looking down. He's so curious, who is this Jesus? And then he is shocked out of his wits when Jesus comes to him at the foot of the tree, looks up in his face, and says, Zacchaeus, I'm going to eat with you today. I'm inviting you to have lunch with me. Only, Zacchaeus, I'm going to come over to your place. I'm going to come and share your food. I'm going to come and share your reality. So for me, this Jesus who invites takes Zacchaeus as he is, and we don't have the details of their conversation. But according to the account that's in the gospel, it doesn't sound like Jesus sat down with Zacchaeus, took a bite of his sandwich, and said, now Zacchaeus, I've been meaning to talk to you. You know, you're a tax collector. You know what tax collectors do. They take more money than they should. So Zacchaeus, I've been meaning to talk to you. I don't think that conversation happened. Because I think if it had happened, it would have been recorded. All that's recorded is Jesus' invitation. I want to come and see your world, Zacchaeus. I want to have some idea of what your life is like. And I'll come to your place. And I'll eat with you. So I want to be a person of invitation. There aren't places that are recorded in Scripture where Jesus holds his hand up in a powerful gesture and says, you must. I don't find it. Do I find places where Jesus was angry? A couple. And who was Jesus angry at? The times when Jesus was angry and when he spoke harshly were to people who thought they knew what everybody else should do. Were people who thought they were much holier than anyone else. Those were the people that Jesus called on the carpet and said, do you see your neighbor? Do you really see who your neighbor is? Come and see. So I don't want to be a person of invitation. I don't want to be a person who portrays the gospel as a force that must be done. The older I get, I'm getting really old, I'm struck by the courage of Jesus. And I find myself praying far more frequently that Jesus will give me the kind of courage that Jesus had. The kind of courage to go into the crowd that had all of their arms raised with a stone in it. And they were ready to hurl the stone at the woman caught in adultery. The crowd was of one mind. No dissenters. Nobody speaking for the woman. Let's be clear. The woman was wrong in doing what she did. Bottom line, she was wrong. She was a sinner against all of the Jewish laws. So the crowd was following what's in the law, because the law was clear. Anyone caught in adultery, a woman caught in adultery, you stone her. I don't know what kind of courage that took for Jesus to stand there in the face of everyone and quietly ask, is there anyone here who has never committed a wrong? If there's anyone here like that, then go ahead. You be the first to throw the stone. I don't know what kind of courage that took. I don't have that kind of courage. I don't. So I keep praying that this Jesus will give me courage, maybe a like kind of courage to Martin Luther King Jr., to stand against the powers, to stand for the justice and the goodness and the respect for all people. The other place of courage that I name for Jesus, in a few Sundays we'll have the Sunday of the Transfiguration that leads us into the season of Lent. And the words in that text stay in my head, because Jesus knew going to Jerusalem was going to be walking into the lion's den. And the words in Scripture are so clear. Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem and to face what was there. He didn't know what the end would be. He had a very strong idea. He was a realist. And he said, I'm going to stand in the middle of that mess as the Son of God. And then this Jesus, we find him kneeling in prayer. And what are the words on his lips before the crucifixion? Lord, if it's possible, please don't let this happen. If there's any other way, God, Abba, my daddy, if you can change it in any way, Jesus, God, please don't let this happen. And then his last words of his prayer, not my will, but your will. So a Jesus of courage, a Jesus of prayer, and a Jesus who's willing to submit to God. Will you pray for me to be like that? It's not a rhetorical question. That's the kind of witness that I want to be to this Jesus who saves me. That's what I want to be able, for us as a congregation, to say to others. You come on over and see what we are, how we are working night and day, heart and soul, to follow this Jesus.